So I definitely say this is an older video, but it's one that I care about. Why don't people buy Sony smartphones? Marquez, I think, did a pretty good job. And if I'm correct, I believe this video has over 7 million views. And I just find it very interesting that that many people will watch this video about a product that most of them aren't going to buy. Either that or everybody who bought a Sony phone happened to just watch this video. So either way, definitely an interesting topic to bring up.
Hey, what's up? I'm KBHD here. And this is the Sony Xperia 1 Mark II. Snapdragon 865, 8 gigs of RAM, a 21:9 widescreen display, triple cameras, a 4,000 milliamp hour battery, an all-glass and aluminum frame, expandable storage, water resistance, wireless charging, Android 10, a high-quality haptic motor, fingerprint reader, and the power button, a revolutionary technology, thin bezels, no hole punch or notch, and just a clean, minimal, modern form factor. Flagship stuff, right? And that's fine, but, technically anybody can build that. But the thing is, this phone also has a bunch of other stuff, unique, really useful stuff that I haven't seen in any other phone. But all of this stuff leads to one question, which is, why don't more people buy these? Like, Sony's had a roughly 0% market share in smartphones for the past couple of years in a row. And I think I have an answer. But first, let me show you what is actually so good about these. So the biggest one for me is this display. So I've mentioned this is a 21:9 aspect ratio, which we've seen a bit more now. It keeps it a bit narrower and more comfortable in the hand, more reachable. And I mentioned the thin bezels. They're not concerned with going all the way to the edges and ending up with a notch or a hole punch or something. And that actually lets them keep the front-facing speakers. So that's awesome. But this screen is also 4K. So it is a 6.5-inch 4K screen in your pocket, which is crazy. I remember the first 4K phone I ever reviewed, which was back in college, was also a Sony phone. But yeah, now even in 2020, there's something wild about seeing that 2160p option on a YouTube video and toggling it, and it legit looking about as good as any other smartphone screen I've seen. Also, pro tip, definitely go into display settings and switch to creator mode if you have this phone, which will give you the most accurate color, the best looking videos.
And I would already ask right there, and I don't know, but how many phones are true 4K phones? I know there's a lot of 1080p, of course, so full HD. I also know that there are some 1440p displays out there, but with aspect ratios changing and things of that nature, I'm not really sure exactly how to I guess, accurately answer that question. But, we're talking that this particular phone, which nobody's buying, that has all those specs that he previously mentioned, is a 4K display. Yet the iPhone, and at least the iPhone SE, I'll say, because I don't know the true resolutions of the other ones, that thing I think is still barely a 720p display. And I'm quite confident all of the SEs, all of the SEs have sold more than Sony in recent years. So I just find that particularly interesting.
Photos. And yeah, everything just looks really good. Now, here's something else. It may seem minor, but this phone has a toolless micro SD card and SIM card tray. Just comes out just like that. Now, expandable storage is already awesome, but to go the extra mile on a phone where people may also take a lot of photos and videos, and to engineer this lever where you can pull the tray out quickly and swap cards whenever you want, all while maintaining water resistance, is actually super impressive. This phone also keeps that headphone jack, so they didn't have to do that. And we all know they didn't have to do that because Sony clearly already sells some of the best wireless earbuds and wireless headphones on the market, but they kept.
And just to make it clear, just like all other companies, Sony did remove the headphone jack. I've owned quite a few devices that were made by Sony in the modern era, I'll say. And just to name the ones I can quickly remember, the Xperia X Compact, the Xperia XZ1 Compact, both of those had headphone jacks. Then I got the Xperia XZ2 Compact that did not have a headphone jack. Then I got the Xperia XZ3 that also did not have a headphone jack. And I believe when they started rebranding back with the Xperia 1, 5, and 10 series, they brought it back. For the first one, I honestly don't remember. And since he's talking about the second generation of the Xperia 5, clearly the Xperia 1, that clearly they brought it back. But Sony did remove it, and I'm sure they probably recognized, wait a minute, it's not that they wouldn't get away with it because clearly all other companies have, but they figured, hey, it is a jack that a lot of people are still using, and it's a good way for us to distinguish ourselves from other manufacturers. So kudos to Sony. And I have an Xperia 5 Mark III, so I'm very glad that it still has a headphone jack.
That headphone jack anyway. Good guy, Sony. Actually, speaking of headphones, if you do order this phone, there's a bunch of bundles floating around. Well, they will bundle in their world-class $350 Mark IV headphones for free. For free. This phone has a lot of really nice software features too. Like I said, it's got Android 10 with Sony's overlay, which is actually pretty close to stock, which may surprise a lot of people. It's a clean launcher with the Google Explorer page next to the side, quick Google search box at the bottom. Not a whole lot of pre-installed apps either, but some nice added stuff here. The always-on display, when it's enabled, will show you the icons for your most recent apps to give you notifications, and they'll actually pulse to let you know which one is your most recent notification, why it's buzzing. There's also easy multitasking on this tall display, and it is smooth and works really well. So check this out. When you hit the button in the middle, it brings you to a multitasker for both panels, where you can switch to a different app, or you can launch different app groups, so 2 at a time, or quit out of it entirely. It is really well thought out, one of the best multitasking UIs I've used on Android and I'll actually want to use. This phone also has a pretty unique feature with the speakers that I talked about, where it will vibrate the chassis to act as extra bass. So it's kind of cheesy, but it also is kind of cool.
Yeah, I've tried that. I don't like it. I mean, I'm sure there's somebody out there that does, but having your phone just constantly vibrating as it goes along to whatever you're listening to is something that Sony definitely could have skipped. Everything that he's mentioned up to this far, I think, was carefully crafted and then engineered and implemented. But yeah, that additional quote unquote bass, just to have the phone vibrating almost uncontrollably, depending on what you're listening to, completely unnecessary.
You turn it up and it literally adds bass from the vibration motor for those lower frequencies. So in songs with a bass line, the phone is literally buzzing in your hand with every bass kick. It's kind of wild. You might want to turn it on or off depending on what you're doing, but that's also not something I've really seen done on any other phone before. And this phone also even has an LED notification light up top, which is rare these days, and an extra customizable button at the bottom that can be used to launch apps or use as a shutter button for the camera. And then speaking of the cameras, this is another area where you'd expect maybe people would want to flock to a phone like this, because think about it, for as good as the best smartphone cameras are, the Pixel cameras, the Samsung cameras of the world, Sony makes all of the sensors for all of those cameras. And then on top of that, Sony also happens to make their Alpha line of cameras, their mirrorless stuff, including the A7S III, which has been pretty much universally
So I honestly don't know. Everything you said, yeah, is accurate, that Sony is making the sensors for all these other cameras. I still don't know what Sony isn't doing properly when it comes to implementing these types of things for their own phones. But for all the phones that I mentioned that I had before, I mean, yeah, they're fine. I'm not looking for world-class photography from a smartphone, but some people are. And then even with my most recent one, the Xperia 5 Mark III that I'm using right now, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I feel like when I set it to automatic mode, the pictures come out okay. But there's the Photo Pro app or whatever, the app that allows you to do a lot of manual toggling. Maybe I'm just doing something wrong, because the photos just don't really come out that great. So if I do need to take a picture with that particular phone, then I end up actually just using the automatic mode. But when I pick up my iPhone or my Pixel or my Galaxy, it just comes out naturally fine. And for most people, I'm sure that's definitely the best solution.
Raised as a technical masterpiece, and potentially just straight up best camera of the year for 2020. So Sony's got camera tech. And sure enough, what do you see? Sony is in fact bringing a lot of the tech from their alpha camera line down into these cameras on the phone. Mainly the incredible autofocus, and that's what I like the most, but also a lot of manual control. So first of all, if you just take photos and videos in the automatic mode in the standard app, like most people will, you'll get a lot of good stuff. There's 3 12 megapixel cameras, the primary, the telephoto, and then a truly wide ultra wide, which is awesome. And photos are pretty good. Very neutral, very, very good dynamic range. Colors are good. Sharpness is okay, and focus is fast. But then there's also the included pro-level photo and video apps called Photo Pro and Cinema Pro. Photo Pro basically shrinks the viewfinder and gives you full-on camera modes and manual levels of control, just like a Sony Alpha camera. It's actually so much control that it requires a bit of a learning curve to get used to shooting it on an entirely touchscreen interface. But there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and just like I said, I just haven't taken the time to figure out how to do it all properly. So I'm going to give the phone the benefit of the doubt that if I knew what I was doing with it, the photos that I would take in that particular mode would come out better. But I'll also say that I purchased this phone secondhand, and the previous owner of the phone was in fact a YouTuber who disassembled the phone for a video to show disassembly and I guess possible repair in the event that you needed to repair something. And I guess they put everything back together. I don't know if they touched the lens or touched something that is causing the photos not to come out as good as they could. But like I said, when I put everything in automatic mode, it seems that everything looks fine. But the moment I start using the manual stuff, I feel like I never have enough light. Like no matter how bright the room is or if I go outside, it just feels like I don't have enough light.
Here, it's pretty awesome, and it gives you world-class autofocus, object and eye tracking, your histograms, your exposure compensation, metering modes, all of that. And then the Cinema Pro app is even crazier to me. You get wide dynamic range, 4K video with profiles, with adjustable manual controls, ISO control, Venice color science, manual focus, and even focus racking. So you can set 2 different focus points, A and B, and then have the camera smoothly rack between them without hunting. Because, yeah, you're totally making a movie on your phone with this thing. This is next level dedication to enthusiasts. But I think that actually kind of
And keep that word in mind, enthusiast, because he made another video, Marquez did, and I'm probably going to attempt to do the same kind of voiceover for the next one. And in fact, I'll just leave with that. The word enthusiast
actually answers the question we're considering in the first place, which is, why don't more people buy these? Why don't more people buy and flock to these awesome phones with tons of enthusiast level features? And part of the answer is...
And I'll stop right there again, that enthusiast level features, aside from the Cinema Pro and the Photo Pro app, I'm not really seeing any enthusiast level features. Maybe that dynamic vibration mode could be considered an enthusiast level feature, but everything else just sounds like a good smartphone to me.
Because enthusiasts really only make up a very, very small percentage of the overall market of anything, but especially of smartphones. Now, don't get me wrong, enthusiast features do sell things sometimes, but if you want that true high-level volume of sales, you need to appeal to everybody. And these kind of don't.
Choosing T-Mobile was like paying for this, but getting that. And with our new price lock guarantee, you won't need to worry about...
And these kind of don't. Like for all those awesome camera features I just talked about, and manual controls, and Venice color science, this phone also just straight up doesn't have a simple night mode. Like people want to just quickly take a great low light photo like Pixel's Night Sight. This doesn't have that. The front-facing camera is only 1080p 30, and we all know a growing mass of people care about the front-facing camera just as much, if not more, than the back ones. It's also a 4K 60Hz display, and I bet you could hand this phone to 1,000 people and not tell them it has a 4K display and ask them what they think, and you'd probably never get a single person asking if it's a 4K screen. And also, most people who already know how to use and take the most advantage of and really like this super high-end manual control on the cameras, most of those people already own and use their own main mirrorless camera or something like that. So don't get me wrong, this is good for those people. It's an added feature, but this isn't a feature that's going to sell new people. Take a look at this chart. This is Sony's volume of smartphone sales for the past few years. Now, obviously, this is a concerning trend, falling from nearly...
And I'm recording this video in 2022, and I don't know if they've gotten any better in the past, 4 years. I will say, I think a year or two ago, they actually made a profit for the first time. The Sony mobile division made a profit for the first time in quite a while. They'd been operating at a loss, and that's because Sony is a really big company, and they're able to make up or actually make money in other departments like selling the PlayStation or cameras or selling components to other smartphone makers. But yeah, they are not making a lot of money when it comes to these cell phones.
40 million smartphones a year for 2 years in a row, all the way down to just 6.5 million sold in 2018. For perspective, that's about as many iPhones as Apple sells in a week in a strong fourth quarter. So to get back in the game, Sony needs a strong 2019, right? They need to pull out a few more smartphones, get a little bit more variety in there, start appealing to more people. Really good phones like the Xperia 1 Mark II, and that should put them back on the map for that is not good at all. And that's because there's one more reason that people don't buy these, even though they're clearly pretty cool and they're pretty good, and maybe they should. And that's because they don't know about these. And if you think about it, that's kind of crazy that the company that makes all these popular mirrorless cameras and this technical masterpiece, and also the PlayStation and all these TVs and everything, that company can't leverage anything to get over 0% in smartphone market share. And from my perspective as a reviewer, it's frustrating because it seems like Sony's kind of suffering from some of the same stuff LG has lately anyway, which is their inability to properly launch a phone to the masses. Like, take...
And I should have let that portion continue, but whatever. Yeah, I agree. The way that they've launched phones over the past couple of years hasn't been great. They'll announce it, and months later will actually release it. And it's like, yeah, you need the hype. You want, the attention, the media coverage, blah, 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 blah. You want, these reviewers to be able to review a phone today or review the phone the day that it's actually released or whatever. And, Sony does a pretty poor job of doing that. But we'll see what he says next. I have seen this video before, and I honestly forget what he's going to say. But I'd say the biggest thing is the fact that they also aren't sold in stores. Some of them are sold in Best Buy, but you're not going to find them in your carrier store, which is where you're going to most likely purchase your phone. So Samsung and Apple have paid all of the cell phone service providers however many millions of dollars to make sure their phones are close to front and center, however you want to describe it, because a lot of the stuff is actually on walls now. But you walk into the store, you look to the left, you look right. One direction is Android, one direction is Apple. And the first thing you're going to see on the Android side are Samsung devices. At this point, when Marquez is making this video, I think LG is still making phones. In 2022, they have stopped, and it's been a few years since they have actually fallen out of the game. Pixels are attempting to make a comeback, and when I say comeback, I mean really attempting to gain any type of market share, because they too now are starting to be sold more so in stores. They've had a couple of deals, I believe, over the last couple of years. What are the other options? At this point, I'm not sure. When you go to Best Buy, you have quite a few options because you have the potential to buy a lot of unlocked phones. But going to your carrier, I feel like the majority of what you're going to see, Apple and Samsung. And that is carefully constructed. And yeah, I can give my opinion on that type of stuff later. But carefully constructed deals to make sure that their phones are front and center. And I mean, case in point, you go to Walmart to attempt to buy a phone case. And it used to be, and when I say used to, I'm still speaking relatively recently. One side of the aisle was Apple, the other side was Android. Then they just said, all right, instead of calling it Android, we'll just call it Samsung, because that's all we're really selling, are Samsung devices. And recently, at least the Walmart close to where I'm living, that Apple side of the aisle is actually starting to expand. And the reason they're doing that is because Apple supports their devices so much longer. So therefore, Walmart feels inclined to continue selling cases for iPhones that are older, but are still supported by Apple. So you got two choices: Samsung or Apple.
Apple, for example, we talk about them a lot, but they're notoriously very good at launching a phone. They'll have an event, then a week later, you can pre-order, and then a week later, they're in the streets. It doesn't take very long. The hype doesn't die. And OnePlus does this too, Samsung does this too. The good launches go that way. This phone was unveiled in May. May. So that's 6 months ago when it first started showing up, and I just got it last week. So May, June, July, August, September, October. That's a long time for the hype to die and for a very poorly thought out launch strategy. And whether it is poorly thought out or poorly executed, it just doesn't look good, period. And it just doesn't look like a priority for your company when it takes that long. Matter of fact, it's taken so long for this phone to...
And yeah, again, I hate when I don't allow him to finish, but as I mentioned before, and then even he was mentioning, Sony makes a lot of other things. And I feel like they're just keeping the cell phone or the mobile division around just to say they have skin in the game. Don't know how much they care. Like, you'd have to talk to somebody internally to say, hey, how much do you actually care about your Sony mobile division? And then compared to their other lines, I can imagine not nearly as much. But when you look at Apple in particular, and I'm not really too sure about Samsung because they too make a lot of things, but Apple in particular, without my opinion is without the iPhone, Apple goes away. I mean, yeah, they're starting to sell more Macs now. They have, without the iPhone, you really don't have the iPad. Without the iPhone, you don't have the M1 and the M2 series of SoCs that are currently in the Macs. Without the iPhone, you don't have an app store, which leads to all of their services revenue. So Apple needs the iPhone. Sony could stop making cell phones tomorrow, and in fact, they might actually, as a company, turn more of a profit as opposed to how they've been operating in the recent years. So, yes, their goals, their incentives are entirely different, but yeah.
Come out that its basically successor has already launched. It's already been announced. It's called the Xperia 5 Mark II for some reason. Sony is terrible with names, and we won't even get into that.
And, not that I'm trying to defend Sony, but they have improved their names. I mean, yeah, the first phones I was mentioning the Xperia X Compact, which is cool because there was a regular X, but then it went to the Xperia XZ1, which you're like, okay, now just alphabet soup. And then there was like an L line, Xperia L, and some other stuff. But you have the Xperia 1, 5, and 10. Those are the phones that are their current flagship. Well, the 10 isn't a flagship, mid-ranger, but the phones that they're really promoting. I haven't been to the website lately, so I don't know what other things they have, but 1, 5, 10. And then the second iteration of those was the 1 Mark II, the 5 Mark II, the 10 Mark II. They're up to the third iteration, so it's the 1 Mark III, the 5 Mark III, the 10 Mark III. Could the naming structure be better? Absolutely. But I think it has improved to try to make it a little more streamlined. And I think don't their cameras, aren't they named that way somehow too? Their Sony Alpha cameras, aren't they named that way somehow?
But, that's a slightly smaller version of this with a 120 hertz display and a little bit of a lower price. And when I go to B&H to try to get my hands on that, well, it's not available till December. So, of course, people don't want to deal with that, especially when you're dealing with expensive phones. You don't want to have your phone arrive the day the sequel is announced. And that's actually bad for reviewers, too. Reviewers want to know that when they review a phone, they have all the most updated information. And if you didn't get one in May or June when they were first getting seeded, like I didn't, and you get one now, and the Xperia 5 Mark II just came out, why would I even want to review this phone anyway? People aren't even going to buy it. So that's the frustrating thing. It's crazy that Sony can make such an interesting, compelling little phone, and there just be absolutely no desire to share it or buy it or anything. But here's the thing. I'm still rooting for Sony because I don't want to see this kind of stuff die. Let's not forget, the more competition in any field, the better the products get. And so while that downward curve sort of makes it look like Sony's mobile division is on life support, and we've seen what that looks like in others before, I don't want it to die for both of us. Either way, that's been it. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.
So I would just say that I'd call myself an avid owner of these phones. Their biggest hiccup, which is the exact opposite of what Apple's doing and what Samsung is attempting to do now, is longevity of support. That, for a lot of device manufacturers, in my opinion, is one of their biggest crutches, and it's really just on the Android side. So, of course, you have the Google Pixel, which I'm not going to pretend to remember what their lengths of support are anymore because they have changed recently. But there's, all right, we're going to support the device for X number of years when it comes to operating system upgrades, but then we're going to support it for this number of years when it comes to security updates. So I don't know if those numbers are the same for the Google Pixel. I feel like with their Tensor chip, they're probably going to make some adjustments. And then Samsung, I think, is doing 4 years of both. But Sony is, I don't know. So the first one that I got, I think it came with Android 7. No, it came with Android 6. Yes, I believe when I turned it on and I purchased it secondhand, it had Android 6 on it. And within a couple of days, Android 7 was being pushed out to it. So that was nice. And then it also got Android 8. But then when I got the Xperia, what was it? Not the Xperia, the XZ. Yeah, the Xperia XZ1 Compact. I believe that only got one operating system update. It went from 8 to 9. And with the other ones that I really don't remember. But if I am thinking correctly, most of their devices have only gotten one security or one operating system upgrade, which for some people is fine. I mean, we were on that upgrade a phone every 2-year cycle, but that has definitely subsided as phones have gotten more expensive, or I'll say they've been less subsidized, in addition to also being more expensive. But that's extremely important where I'm looking at my Xperia 5 Mark III, and I'm like, okay, I believe it was released with Android 11. It did get Android 12. I don't know if it's going to get 13. Whereas my iPhone 12, which came out, in 2020, is going to be supported for another 4, if not 5 years. Like, I'm not worried about longevity of support when it comes to that device. Same thing with my Samsung. Came out a couple months ago, back in February. It's going to be supported for another 3 to 4 years. So Sony can definitely work on that. They can work on their partnerships if they wanted to with cell phone service providers. They could advertise more. There are a lot of things they could do, but at the end of the day, their incentives are different, and I truly just don't think that they care enough to put forth the effort that these other companies are putting forward. And I think that'll be it. Yeah.